If the child does read aloud well, and I know this is a common scenario, let's say he reads aloud well. He does a good job at that. What is the major reason he cannot understand what he's reading?
Well, there's lots of possibilities at that point. You've ruled out the possibility that there's not good information coming to the child, which is a major one. But at that point, you have to look at, does the child understand the vocabulary that's being used in this text? Because many times, authors will use vocabulary because it's interesting to them or it shows their ability to write well, and it's not necessarily easy for the child to understand, even if they're a secondary school student. And so consequently, we need to look at, is there a vocabulary issue here? And so the first thing I would then go back and ask the student, okay, tell me what this word means. Tell me what this word means. And if they can define them, well, then we've ruled out another major possibility as to why the child might be having problems.
Right. Makes perfect sense. Well, why don't you see if you can share maybe some strategies that would help students improve their reading comprehension skills? Give us parents some tools to use.
Okay, that's relatively simple. Again, parents lump reading into one kind of great ball of ideas, and they really don't tend to sort out decoding strategies from comprehension strategies. And so if we know the child is decoding properly, now we can look at some comprehension strategies. And the first one is basically what the newspaper reporters do, and that is to answer the 5 questions, what, when, where, who, and how. And so I would have the student read the information and then comment on each of those 5 journalistic points. That would be the first one.
Okay.
The second one is basically to have the student read the passage and then ask the student, tell me the main idea of that passage.
Okay.
I mean, if they understand what they're reading, they should know what the major premise is that they've just read about.
Right.
Okay. There's a second one, or a third one, that's kind of fun to do, and it's called relevant detail. And basically, I would start, if I know the student's having difficulty, I would have them using the text, and then I would say to them, okay, you've told me the main idea. Now tell me some ideas that support that. Tell me some things that happen that relate to that. And they can go through and pick them out, literally, using their finger, until they get good at it. And then I'll simply say, okay, now close the book. Let's do that exercise again, only this time you have to think about it and tell me you can't use the materials.
Okay.
So you can take that in steps to develop it.
Sure.
Right.
Okay, what about teaching higher order thinking skills?
Well, higher order thinking skills, that comes straight out of the educational literature. I don't know who...
Isn't that what they all want?
Yeah, but whoever bothered to define it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're not really sure in most cases what people talk about when they refer to higher order thinking skills.
What is it?
Well, what I talk about in that situation are things like analogies. Analogous learning. If you know one thing, can you relate it to something that's analogous to that?
Okay.
And the answer is, well, that's like any other skill. You literally have to teach that to the student. So, so if I say to you, a bird is to air as a fish is to, and leave it blank, what would you say?
Sea.
Water, yeah.
Water.
Okay.
And the answer is, where do you find a fish?
Right.
Okay, so then you can, if you do this enough, you can begin to see a pattern in analogies. And once you know the pattern, then we can teach the student a rule. And this is what's really fun, is when they have the rule, then they can solve any analogy.
Okay, well, is there an easy way? I just see parents now listening to that going, okay, so how do I teach analogies?
Okay,
is there an easy way to do that?
Absolutely, teach them the rule. And the rule is, whatever the first part of the analogy talks about, the second part of the analogy has to talk about the same kind of thing.
Okay.
So if I say to you, a bird is to air as a fish is to,
right.
and you say water, well, what is the first part of the analogy about? It's about where do you find a bird? And the next part of the analogy is, so where must you be able to find a fish?
Sure.
Okay. A bird is to wings as a fish is to?
Fins.
Well, yeah, and so if you analyze that, it says, how does a bird move? Using wings. How does a fish move? Using fins.
Okay.
So if they understand the relationship between the two parts of analogies, then you can simply teach the student the rule. Whatever the first part talks about, the second part has to talk about the same kind.
That's not difficult.
No, it's not. But they make it sound terribly complex in most books.